Welcome to another episode of Roots to Health. I'm your host, Dr. Craig Keever, and this is my lovely vegan chef and wife, Amy.
How to tile.
So this episode we've entitled What's on the Plate? How to Build a Kid-Friendly Plant-Based Meal. Basically, you know, we've kind of talked a lot about the whole concept of plant-based eating and why it's important, and just a very brief rehash of that, of course, is, you know, there's a lot of science actually that's going on in the science of nutrition. And it's been going on for a number of years, but it's getting, I think, more press now. And I think it's gaining a little bit of momentum. We're still not what I would consider mainstream. And I'll point to a couple of reasons for that in a minute, but I think the first thing that I want to say about this today is that the research is really clear, you know, that even if you don't go completely plant-based, a diet that is really heavy in fresh fruits and vegetables is always a healthier option. I think I can be very safe in saying that, you know, and I think I've said on the podcast before, you know, I think I say that word too much, you know. But anyway,
It's what we are.
it's what we are. So, where was I? You know, the science really points to this being the healthiest way, and I'm not particularly about being anybody's food police. You know, and I tell this to my patients and their families all the time. You know, I'm not about necessarily trying to push my agenda
Right.
in my appointments.
Well, I always say what's made me think about it is like a food pope, because they feel like they need to confess, you know,
Right.
well, I really it's okay. We're here for those that need advocacy. That
Exactly.
Needs, resources.
And I think the reason this way of eating and this way of living has not gained more traction, in large part, two big factors I see. And the first is that nobody wants to own up to, and I certainly never wanted to own up to, is food addiction. You know, we like what we like,
Right.
and we get hooked on it. And to couple that with, you've got big industry behind all the unhealthy things
Right.
in our diet. You've got big meat, you've got big egg, you've got big pharma, you've got big dairy. You know, there's a lot of money in all of that.
Dairy is very much backing breast cancer awareness. So those things that are raised funds, I'm not saying I know all of that, but a great deal of it is to go towards research that's,
Yep.
you know,
And the
funding
flip
for
side
dairy.
of this that occurs to me as I've thought about these kind of things, there's no big broccoli
Right.
or big asparagus or big cabbage
Yeah.
pumping tons of money into research and marketing for those things, you know, the healthy diet.
Can't market a broccoli. You know, I can't own that realm.
Exactly. So, you know, it's an uphill climb.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, all those things that ended up being really bad for my health are really tasty.
Well, and they have that. I mean, like, there's no question. If I'm, I had a retreat this week and I brought all my food, but if I ever have any kind of those, even if it's vegan junk food, it's like, I mean, that doesn't have it like meat and dairy did, as far as like these addictive qualities, as that you find. And something, I met a dear person who's now a dear friend of mine that has alpha-gal, and so alpha-gal has gotten people really looking at things because there's bone in sugar to whiten the. I can't explain how they do that, but it's like it's in so many things you don't think about. Gelatin, gummy bears are bones.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, crushed and boiled, and yeah.
Oh.
Mhm.
Okay, yeah, no. No.
So yeah, I mean, so it's an uphill climb, and we used to joke a lot initially about, and we still throw them out there once in a while, about how sometimes it feels like, or I used to think this way, that it was going to be like when eating plant-based, it's all just grass and cardboard, but Amy has shown me the flip side of that eating plant-based is one of the most rewarding, tasty, and satisfying ways of eating that doesn't,
Without that backlash after you
without
eat.
the backlash.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
I saw a meme this week that had said, here's a salad for a non-vegan, how a non-vegan thinks we eat. And then here's a salad made by a vegan. And it's like, that's how I started, was like terrible. Just, I did it bad.
Yeah. So yeah, I think to kind of point this towards helping our kids make good choices and teaching them how to eat right, that's kind of why this all matters, and what it really boils down to, and the big reason that I first came to this was my health. And being 100 pounds overweight and type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure and high cholesterol and on 5 medicines. And now I'm off of all
And
of
it just was getting progressively worse.
And it was getting progressively worse.
And I was terribly scared of going to the doctor before I met you. You really did help me so much, and plant-based helped me so much, because I had all these weird symptoms. I was so scared that something really bad was going to happen to me because I had all these weird symptoms. And so we just don't have that. You're never going to see a 100-year-old carnivore diet person. It won't happen. You'll never see a carnivore diet person without some level of heart disease. Right. And you're never going to see heart disease in a whole food, plant-based, no oil vegan. Right. Maybe vegan junk food, but it's not possible. I don't think people realize that.
And to that end, I recently watched a video on YouTube from one of our favorite plant-based people, Dr. Joel Furman, and they were talking about the amount of research that's out there now supporting, and this is real research that is not really approaching it from a perspective of wanting to promote a particular thing. They're just looking for what is the truth, right? As opposed to, there is a lot of, I don't know if it's a lot or not, but there is pseudo research out there that's bought and paid for by big meat, big egg, or misinterpreted by these big corporations.
Comparing a Twinkie to something, maybe a little bit healthier, and that's the study.
Yeah.
And I should say, as a disclaimer, you would find heart disease in someone who had history with meat and dairy who is now whole food plant-based. So I don't want to make it sound like that,
right.
It can't be possible that way.
But Dr. Furman's point was, there's now thousands of solidly well put together research projects that prove the value of plant-based eating. And there's almost nothing out there for instance, the current fads of carnivore, like you'd mentioned, or keto.
So scary.
And yet those ways of life, carnivore and keto, I think they're looking for a way to justify eating everything they want.
Well,
that's my own personal impression. I don't have science behind that statement.
And what I want to say to people is, question your doctors that are telling you this. Do you have a nutritional background? Because doctors are out there touting that, and they have no research. They've seen a YouTube video themselves. I guarantee you there's not science-based research that says you should be on keto and a long-term study. Give me a 20-year pattern of keto, and nobody stays on that.
Right.
Nobody. It's not sustainable.
It isn't.
And your liver could not handle it if you could handle it.
Right. Right.
I want to show you this one little thing first. Let's see. I had it pulled up. Now I lost it. I thought this was so good. We have it on our page, and it has circles, and it says, first it is intention, then a behavior, then a habit, then a practice, then a second nature, then it simply is who you are. And that's really where we're at. we don't say that at all. It's like, look at us, but saying it really is just second nature. I wouldn't even think about eating any other way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And so then why does this point so strongly to getting kids started on this? Well, I was going to mention something we talked about before a few minutes ago about, how the meat and dairy is problematic. But I think no matter how you eat, whether it's carnivore, omnivore, whatever, I think just about everybody can point to processed foods.
Absolutely.
And when you're talking about addictive, yes, I think there are some addictive qualities to meat and dairy and those type of things. But the processed food, I mean, some of these corporations actually have full departments
Right.
set to make their products craveable.
It's really
Which
not
is
food.
addictive.
It's a chemical.
That's exactly right.
I mean, what I'm seeing with kids now is they're eating too many calories, so they're overweight, but they're nutritionally anorexic in a sense. They're nutritionally deficient in a way that we can really stand to do a lot less calories, and our body does not think of us being in starvation mode. I almost wonder, does the body look at it that way when they're not getting the nutrients, but they're getting caloric?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. So and then when you look at the nationwide statistics in terms of why is this important for kids, I don't think that there has ever been a time in history where this percentage of kids was obese, where we're seeing type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease in kids. And it's all related to all the processed garbage.
And we're also seeing a huge rise in anxiety. We're seeing a lot of depression. I mean, I was listening to a speaker last week, and he said, I have never seen it. He goes into jails and kind of, helps them work out their issues and things like that. And he said, I've never seen it this bad.
Yeah. So, I think there's a lot of reasons, to go heavier on the plant-based. If you can't go completely plant-based, I totally get that. It's a big decision. It's a big jump, and I think there are a number of ways to go about it. And we've kind of talked about it and hinted at it at some of our podcasts before. How do you get started with this? And that's kind of why this idea for this topic has evolved. And because if you start getting the whole idea of eating fruits and vegetables as a kid, it's not such a jump later in life.
That's the best gift you could give your kids.
Really
and we are wanting to talk to moms. I've reached out to several boards to just hear, how did you do it? Were you plant-based from the get-go? And so, because mom and dad really have to transition. You can't transition a child without mom and dad. So that's a hard sell,
That's a very good point. And as we're talking about how do you get your kids to eat that, that implies that mom or dad, or both, hopefully, have kind of latched on to at least getting more fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
Why is that so important? And of course, the flip side of that question is, where do you get your protein? We talk about that all the time, as if protein wasn't in fresh fruits and vegetables. Right. Granted, it's not in fresh fruits and vegetables to the degree it is in meat.
Right.
But as we've also talked about in other episodes, in this country, protein deficiency is non-existent. Okay? What is existent is fiber deficiency.
And terrible levels of colorectal cancer. It's like that's
and inflammatory bowel disease.
And autoimmune disease.
And autoimmune disease. All these things.
We are the sickest country out there.
All these things have links to our diet. Yeah. And hence one of my very favorite phrases as we moved into this, and I'm talking more, is food is medicine.
Totally. Changed my life, changed your life.
Exactly.
I mean, it's hard not to talk about it and I was encouraged at this retreat. We were with so many amazing women, and I had several people, once they found out I was plant-based, were like, well, what about this? They were curious about it. And so, and one lady said, well, what if I couldn't do all of it? I said, absolutely. I said, what about Meatless Monday? She's like, yeah, we're doing that. Mm-hmm. So it is being talked about in a way that gosh, I feel sorry for people that were plant-based 20 and 30 years ago because there are a lot of resources now
There are.
to just find it.
There are. So part of the purpose of this chat today is to kind of address some common misconceptions again, and we've talked some about some of these, and to help parents maybe start to deal with if they're really interested in moving their child more towards plant-based eating, whether it's all at once or step at a time.
Right.
What are some of the common issues that happen as we're moving that direction?
And I will say a good resource for moms is the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine /Kids. They have a lot of great things about how much B12 they're needing and how much, great videos. And we're going to be giving a free PDF, a downloadable PDF of some recipes for moms it'll be linked in the show notes. So
awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving right along then. This second segment here we'll call the anatomy of a kid-friendly plant-based meal. What does this look like?
I love your titles.
So how does this look putting this meal together? Anytime we're talking about a human diet, we're talking about the 3 macronutrients, okay? And of course, protein leads the way because that's what generally everybody wants to hear about right away.
We got to get that out of the way.
We got to get that out of the way. So I think the first thing I would say about protein is, and I've kind of come to this in the last few days as I've thought about it and how to make this just easy to understand, how much protein does a person need in a day? And I've gone through several different permutations of kind of, what it really boils down to is get your weight in pounds, and it's pretty close to half that.
Right.
I mean, there are different ways to tweak it. You can tweak it to need to tell yourself if you're like a bodybuilder and you need more, or if you're a kid in a growing phase, you need a little more, or you're an older person who, and not in their 60s, because seniors need more as well, but your average adult from 20 to 50 probably needs a little less,
right? Depending
on what you're doing.
And just to remind people that maybe didn't hear you talk about this, that we don't store protein. So
that's right. Yeah. I mean, to kind of paraphrase what she's talking about, yes, of the macronutrients, protein is the only one that we have no storage for. With carbohydrates, we have a substance that our body makes called glycogen, and that releases glucose and under the proper conditions to keep our blood sugar level. Our fat storage is infinite. We can get as fat as we want.
Yeah.
And that, yeah. And so, but when we eat too much protein, what happens to that is we use what we need for that given day in terms of muscle repair, hormone production, all kinds of things. But at the end of the day, when we're done using the protein, if we don't use it, it is metabolized into carbohydrates or fat and stored that way.
So, and I've never really been someone who really had more than like a glass of wine or two, and my liver enzymes were getting higher when I was on meat and dairy, and it was taxing my liver. It was, and I talked to my doctor at the time. He goes, "Oh, don't worry. I know people. I have ladies in their 70s that don't even drink, and this is happening to them too." And I thought, "Don't worry." I mean, it's like, yeah.
So that's issue number one. What are our sources for proteins, and how do we get kids to eat them? Well, our sources primarily are going to be things like tofu and lentils and beans and chickpeas and nut butters, things of that nature. There are, also proteins in grains. Again, we're talking about percentages, and it's different, okay, in all these things. But there are proteins in them. There are proteins in all the colorful vegetables. Broccoli has protein.
Right. Watermelon has protein.
The watermelon has protein. So yeah, there's ways to get your protein, and then all of these other macronutrients, the fat and the carbohydrates, are also in these things, like the whole grains. We got plenty of carbohydrates in those, along with a little protein. Our veggies have lots of carbohydrates. The beans, to back up, have
Beans are great.
yeah. I mean, there are
That's why you
superfoods.
feel good. That's why
Yeah.
it's satiating. You feel like you're not. Because I was listening to Doug Lyle this morning, and he's a really great one. That's the pleasure trap. Is that
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And he was trying to. We won't deep dive into this because I can't exactly explain it. But he was talking about wet fats versus dry fats and things like that. But he was just saying people will load up on water thinking that fills them up. And he said, that's not how the body works. He said, it's going to delay a little bit, but it's not going to, you're going to be just as hungry. You need meat-like things that are going to keep you satiated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all those nutrients. And then, of course, speaking of one of those nutrients that helps keeps us satisfied longer, healthy fats.
Yeah.
Avocados, nuts
Very
and
important for
seeds.
kids.
Very important for kids. Kids' diet is probably a little heavier in the fats. The average adult without metabolic issues can probably tolerate about a 30% of their calories coming from fats, give or take.
But I do always find it interesting that we have the lowest fats of any species in the breast milk.
Right.
And then this is why I say, there's several plant-based doctors that have said whole milk or milk for a child in that first year of life is very dangerous.
Yes.
It's taxing on their kidneys.
Well, and speaking of that, that's a good reminder. I've actually been reading a little more about dairy stuff, and you're right. Cow's milk has 3 times the amount of protein, and that's the problem. We don't give infants,
and probably 3 times the amount of fat, I would guess.
I didn't read any stats on that, but you may be right. But the issue with the proteins is in infants, especially, that can create such a burden on the digestive process in the intestines that it creates little tears in the surface of the lining, and ends up possibly creating anemia.
Wow. I hadn't heard that.
So, yeah, and sets you up as a risk factor for type 1 diabetes.
I've heard that.
So there's a number of reasons we don't do pure cow's milk, but formulas can be based on cow's milk as well. It's not worth saying that cow's milk is useless because it's been used for a long time,
Right.
and there are nutrients in it. But when we're talking about needing to get proper nutrients, my approach to this is really, where do we get the best ones?
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Because
we'll go for gold.
you can get, yes, you can get protein, you can get fat,
Right.
but where is our source for the ones that are best for our body? And that's the major issue. And that's the sticking point that a lot of people really want to argue about.
Well, and I still go back to what's in that cow's milk, because I have been around rendering. My father was in it. I have been around dairies, and it's like there's a lot of stuff that those cows are being fed that, it's
Right.
It's a lot.
Well, right. And as we've talked about too, my first approach to this way of eating was because of my health issues. But as I've gotten into it and have recognized, to your point, the ethics of the animal industry, it's not good.
Yeah.
And nobody in the industry wants that out.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it's not good.
Well, and I saw something today, and I may have to hunt for it a little bit, but it was talking about, okay, here it is. I hope I can read it without my readers. It said on the Earth's surface that 76%, I think, of land was about agriculture, as far as trying to feed these animals. I mean, it's just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to break this down more, but it was just crazy, the statistics.
Yeah. So trying to get then back to how does this all apply to our kids' plate?
Right.
Okay. Because in recognizing some of the issues, for instance, the picky eater,
Mm-hmm.
toddlers and young children, school-age children, are often notorious for,
Right.
once they're introduced to the processed garbage.
That's it. I mean, I've seen vegan babies that from birth, they've been vegan, and those kids eat a artichoke like it's, a candy, so it's like, it is their taste buds that have been reset.
Yep.
Those are not natural things.
That's right. And so, yes, I would say, particularly at first in a kid that's been exposed to a lot of processed garbage, it's going to be a tough sell.
Same as a human being.
Same as an adult. That's exactly right.
Human being. The child's not a human being sometimes.
So as a parent, if you're trying to get your kid to do this, then it becomes incumbent on us to, how do we make this more interesting,
right,
more flavorful, more fun?
And that's what I like about Planetful Kiki's Planetful Kids book. I mean, it's really based on probably older kids, not toddlers, but it's just making it look desirable for kids, just really pretzels and, my friend that has alpha-gal, we were talking about it, and she said, they don't even know they're eating vegan. I fix things like that. And she was saying how when they'll have an event or something, and there's just such stigma to think like, yeah, but you like vegetables, you like an apple.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, some apple pie rings. Those look really good.
Yeah.
Just really tasty.
All right. So we'll move along into segment 3, overcoming some common challenges. We've kind of addressed those a little bit. The dealing with the picky eater. How do you do that? I think there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And I think for a kid that's been, that's had a significant portion of processed food in their diet, it's probably going to be a slow change. To rapidly change is not going to go over well.
And with blended families and things like that, it gets hard because they go off or they go to some party. If the whole world had this available, it might be a little bit easier.
Right.
It makes it hard for us.
It's hard. Yeah, it's a challenge.
And it can be ostracizing for a child.
And we'll get to that too. Yeah. There's a couple of topics here in that. So I'll give a for instance in terms of how I approached this when I started modifying my diet. When I finally realized that my health had been jeopardized, and it was really because I was eating the standard American diet and not getting enough activity. Those two things. The very first thing I did before I had done any research on anything was I stopped drinking soda.
Right.
That's one of the biggest. I always tell my kids in my checkups, there are 0 nutritional benefits to drinking soda. 0. It's all sugar and chemicals. And if you're drinking diet, it's all chemicals and none of it's good for you.
Yeah.
And so when I finally latched a hold of that and got serious about changing my health, the first thing to go was soda.
Yeah.
That's just a no-brainer. And so my point with that is really I was starting the process and taking it just one step at a time. Mm-hmm. Because really to change and go do an about face 180 degrees from eating one way to eating the other way, you might be successful for a couple of days. If you're lucky, a week.
Yeah.
And then you're going to say, oh, this is too hard.
Yeah, that's kind of how I did it. I went all or nothing, and then I went back and forth for a while, for sure.
So taking it a step at a time and finding, for me, what was the worst part of my diet and just eliminating that was one method.
Right.
I think other methods with kids, particularly the school-age kids, elementary school and up, maybe a little difficult for toddlers, but it could be found a way to get them involved in the kitchen.
Totally. That's the key.
Yeah.
For sure.
Let them
and get them fun lunch pails and get them, the bento boxes and things like that.
Yeah. Let them experiment with their food. Let them help produce their meal.
Sometimes having something different might even be something that other kid would be like, well, you go there.
That's right.
So, and it's all a mindset, really.
It is a mindset.
Because my mom was very independent and like, hey, it doesn't matter what the rest of the world's doing. And that that helps me in a lot of ways, because if you have that mentality, I see people on plant-based boards all the time saying, "Well, people are making fun of me." It's like, I don't know if that affects me and you. I don't know that we really care. And so it's like, do you have some people that you need to just be, let it go, but then maybe, just let them know like that's a problem, because you've got to do it in a way, or maybe some boundaries need to be put in place.
Right. Yeah. So another way, is probably kind of working in this idea about getting the kids involved in the kitchen, making fun shapes of foods.
Yeah.
Again, just to make it interesting for the kid to kind of tie in.
Yeah.
Some of these foods have different textures. I very much recognize that they're, with sensory kids, autistic kids, and not even fully autistic, but just kids that have sensory issues.
Yeah.
Diet is a big deal and can be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And those kids just have to go a lot slower with
And
this.
maybe an air fryer could help, because I know crunchy is
Air fryer, yep.
the thing that you want to have.
And another very good option that often goes over well is smoothies.
Uh-huh.
A lot of times a kid will drink something that they won't touch if it's solid.
I see kids all the time on the smoothie shred, Dr. Goldner's. Those are green smoothies, and they'll be like, my toddler's fighting me for it. He wants some of it. And part of that may be because mom's like, this is so amazing.
Right.
As moms, we know all too well, you gotta be half drama coach, as far as like, oh, this is incredible.
So I think the biggest thing in dealing with picky eaters is just kind of that patience factor, and really trying to work with them and get them involved and see where all this is coming from, and play with this, make it fun.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal.
And Apple Seeds is doing a lot of good work that way. They go in.
Yes, they are.
I'm a part of the Bentonville Garden Club, which I love and adore. And they go into the schools and help the kids with their gardens. And they do meals together. Helen Lampkin, our darling Helen, does a lot of that. And many of the ladies do.
Yeah.
So the kids love it. They are so empowered by that. Their focus is not at all like, are we eating vegetables? They just like that they are a part of the planning. That's a big deal.
So other common challenges, as you were alluding to, on a social basis, if my kids are being ostracized because they're vegan or whatever, at parties, at school lunches, how do you deal with school lunches?
Yeah.
Sadly, the government is subsidized by big dairy and big meat and whoever else gives the money.
We grew up, our ladies in the cafeteria were making home cooked meals, and everything kind of comes on a truck now.
Yep.
So it's really, really difficult for moms to get past that.
It is. And so I would offer that, the plant-based eating kids are probably better off avoiding school lunches. I mean, it's sad to say. There may be some things that could be picked out.
And community. Try to find other vegan moms in your area.
That's a big deal.
And get kids talking to other kids that, because, again, at this retreat, we had all these lovely ladies, and it's like, I'm all in my bright artist wear, but I was just like everybody else there because I was with everybody that was, wearing bright clothes. Maybe they didn't have pom-poms for earrings, but so if a child can see somebody like them, same thing with, if someone's going through cancer, you just need community in that.
Well, and here's the other fact, I think, as we're talking about this socialization process with kids, and particularly as they're getting older and their friends are meaning more to them, it doesn't have to be, and I don't want to be crucified for saying this, but as a kid's going through this, I like what Rich Roll talked about with raising his kids.
Yeah.
He always talked to them as they're going out. And one of the things he said stuck in my mind. He said, I always talk to them and tell them, just try to make good choices.
That's right.
As a parent, not lording this over them is a big deal.
Now, sometimes it's a mom just trying to be an advocate for their kid. Like they're just trying, they're too young. And it's not that the kid's like trying to go off. It's that they're saying, hey, we should be able to we should not have to have all that junk, because it's
Right.
on the ethical side. And I will say, I've seen some little 5 and 6-year-old girls that know that they don't eat animals, and that helps the child. Dr. Morgan told
Right.
us that.
Yeah. The
Kids
ethical
need that
biases.
mission.
Yeah.
So that helps kids sometimes, and there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do
Yep.
it.
Yep. So it's really just a process for our kids of educating them. And I
Exactly.
really strive, especially as kids are getting older,
And empowering them.
And they're getting older and they start to really understand what's behind all of this. And I've got a kid, actually, what is he, 13 or 14? And he is just hooked on Dr. Pepper. And I met with him.
Can't imagine someone doing that.
Well, I met
That's
with
in
him a
my
month
history.
ago, right? I'm not saying this to point at you.
No, I know.
So I met with him last month and we talked about, what are the healthy choices we can make. And he was talking about he drinks probably 3 to 5 Dr. Peppers a day.
Yes.
Right. And
What age?
he's like a young teenager,
Okay.
from 12 to somewhere around there. And he and his dad and I were saying, his dad was really fully supportive of, let's try and do healthier. Let's try.
Once he getting a hold of it.
No, I didn't go there.
saying.
But when I talked to him about limiting or eliminating that was one of the things like happened to me when I started to change and just gave up soda. Well,
And that was a good thing that they took it out of schools. Because I was getting them that way. I was in a little Christian school that had a little Coke,
Right.
thing. So
yeah, his dad jumped on the bandwagon, and I just saw him a couple of days ago, and he has cut his consumption in more than half.
that's awesome.
So
It just takes just one day better
That's right.
is better.
And so that's my point with this is the education process is a big deal, but I don't do this 100% compliantly.
Right.
I'm not going to expect my kids to do that.
Right.
So
Well, just like Doug Lyle, I mean, you and I are eating vegan foods, but he said, every once in a while I go out and get a vegan pizza. And he said, and I love the way he explained it because he said, someone was saying, does a glass of wine hurt? He goes, is it a toxin of some kind? Yes. But he said, to what enjoyment? He said, I was around some other plant-based doctors that were doing it. And he said, it's not enjoyable for me. And he said, but am I going to have a cup of coffee that has a little bit of a caffeine, a little bit of a drug addiction? Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to occasionally have a vegan pizza. So it's like, it's all going back to that test and measure kind of thing.
Yep.
Because I was telling somebody about the steakhouse when we saw it had 400 fat grams in one meal, not that we were eating that meal anymore, but we were eating things that were like, okay, that's 35 to 45 grams of fat.
Right.
Dr. Lyle said, if you're trying to lose weight, you have no business having nuts in your diet.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me. Because our sauces.
Yeah.
We love those good.
That's right.
I packed the Alfredo sauce with me this week, and I'm like, oh, that's one of my favorites. It's just like Alfredo.
So, and then the last challenge I want to just point to is the fact that, the convenience factor of processed foods and the other things that we tend to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big deal because the prep time then becomes much greater doing this plant-based stuff. Now, how do you there is a hack to taking care of that, but it still requires a little bit of time and forethought. Right. But you, on, let's say, a weekend, make a big pot of something, make your week's worth of food.
Well, it's just like this trip. I'm sure if someone had watched how much I prepped and then hauling up that big ice chest upstairs and things like that. And then I had to stay at a hotel the night before, so I had to haul it up to the hotel. I know that, and there's times where I'm going like, oh, Lord of mercy, I should just go get some food here. But once it was there, I was so grateful. I was so grateful because when I spoke, I forgot to eat before I spoke, and I wouldn't have had any, we were in a very remote location. Yes, I could have gone to a gas station, but that would have been about it. And so I've gotten to where it's very comforting to me now.
Oh, yeah, very much so. All right. Did you happen to bring any specific things to point to.
I've got, and I kind of wanted to just hear from you, like, what are some of your favorite meals that you like? That, I mean, it's kind of hard to think of them on the spot, but just so people kind of know, like, what are we eating? You know, I mean, like, I'll start.
Okay.
I did the vegan crab cakes, which I'm telling you, y'all, that is like so good. It's heart of palm and chickpea is in it, and it has that flakiness. Like, it tastes just like a crab cake to me. And the remoulade sauce, I brought the, you're kind of trying to avoid pastas, but I did pasta with the fettuccine Alfredo sauce. Amazing.
Yeah.
So
And
good.
just to point out, I'm avoiding pastas just because that's
Spike you.
a type of carbohydrate that tends to spike my blood
And
sugars.
it's, I mean, I did white pasta, so it's not the best choice. I
Right.
mean, but I was, you know, when I go off like that, I'll give myself a little luxury that I might, because I know you're not eating it. When we're
Well, on the
together.
flip side of that is you don't have the metabolic problems I
Right.
have. So it's not going to cause your blood sugar to spike like
It doesn't. I mean, it's not probably the best choice, but it doesn't.
Right.
But, and then we have the tuna-ish, as I say.
Right? Yeah.
Tastes just like tuna fish.
And you make that from?
Chickpeas.
There you go.
And tofu.
And
There's a silken tofu that's kind of like the, what is it, mayonnaise that you put in.
Mhm.
It's been so long since I've had tuna fish. I don't even know if I fix that. But what else did I pack? I did the quinoa salad, which is one of my favorites.
Oh, that's a
Peanut Thai sauce. So you have your tofu scramble.
Yes, that's. I mean, that's my go-to. When I first started this process, oatmeal with some fruit on it was my go-to for breakfast.
I always feel bad if you have to have the same thing. You're like, really?
and so after enough time on this and enough weight loss, I figured out finally that for me, oatmeal is another one of those things that if I eat too much of it, it's spiking my blood sugar. And so I went on a search for an alternative for breakfast because that's what I was eating. And I've tried, you know, there are several plant-based types of scrambled eggs, fairly pricey.
Right.
And come to find out, you can get extra firm tofu and mix that with sauteed vegetables and throw in the right spices. And it's just like scrambled eggs.
And it's not really got a lot of fat in it. The other one has an enormous, the Just Eggs has like 50 grams. That little bitty carton has like 50 grams of fat. You know, I mean, like what I half-heartedly say, like, do we really need to know all this? But there's some things it's like, it's not worth it.
Yep.
And, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, I really want to encourage everybody to get their blood work done because, you know, there's some people that will even try to eat. I've heard people say, I'll eat right and 2 weeks before I get my blood work done. Like, you're fooling you, not the doctor, you know?
Right.
And there's a lot of things that wouldn't even work anyway. But, but, you know, if your numbers are telling you, I mean, this is what I wish people could understand. Nothing feels as good as this, that it is worth everything. I don't, and how you look at it really matters because I've seen people that went vegan and they're just like, yeah, you know, we really don't feel that way.
No, we don't. Now, what we do have is periods of time where, because, we're eating at home all the time.
Right.
We don't have.
I'm really not crazy about that one. But.
Yeah, we really don't have the ceremony of going out to eat and how fun that can be. And so we've had to figure out ways to make it different.
Yeah. And like me, I never really have had a lot of mixed drinks, but I love the ritual of like maybe having a glass of wine. So I've really gotten excited about mocktails because we're using, and if people want to join our plant-based tribe, it's the Keever's Plant-Based Tribe. It's on Craig's website.
It's a Facebook page.
And it's going to be linked in the show notes as well. But we've just been having super fun with like pomegranate balsamic and chocolate balsamic and the California balsamics I haven't tried.
Yeah, all kinds of different flavors.
So much good.
It's beautiful.
So much goodness.
So.
Well, and I'll just throw out a couple examples. Like for toddlers, a mini zucchini chickpea patty with apple. That'd be kind of close to what I do. A fruit and veggie smoothie. So you can, this is another thing I want to tell moms. We do a smoothie that has kale in it, and you really would not know that it has kale in it, except that it's the coloration. But you can get those vegetables in a kid through a smoothie that they wouldn't normally eat them.
That's a fact.
So preschool, tofu nuggets, I mean, they taste so good. Almond butter, banana sushi rolls, and then up on elementary age, Asian-inspired stir-fry with tofu veggies, with rice noodles. Again, make it fun, something they've never seen before. And that's what we're trying to do in this upcoming garden that we're talking about, is to have vegetables and things. Someone told me that they did a tour of their garden with school-age kids, and the beet was every kid's favorite. And it was some particular beet that I cannot remember, but it doesn't have that earthy, dirt taste. So, yeah.
Well, cool. So in terms of finding recipes that are more kid-friendly, you've got some resources.
Yeah, so Plentiful Kids is a great one. I think this is good about getting the kids involved. And we've talked about some of these, but plant-based baby and toddler. This is one that we've really not talked about, but it's endorsed by Dr. Colin Campbell, plant-powered families. So those are some. And then I'm going to try to link some of those. We've linked some last time. We've got a show coming up about lifestyle medicine as well, where we kind of go through the other pillars of lifestyle medicine, which would be, you could rattle that off.
Well, all the pillars, there's 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, with the first one being nutrition, but then we've got exercise, sleep, stress management, avoidance of toxic substances, and relationships.
These are all very important. That's the Blue Zones in a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
So if you haven't seen the Blue Zones, that's a good show to see on Netflix.
So all these books are great resources for specific kid-friendly recipes, and we'll have links to those in our notes.
Yes.
And you mentioned
we're going to have some recipes. I always love videos, so I'm going to get as many videos as I can. Some of these, we won't be able to do that, but I'm going to do every age group, from toddlers to pre-K to middle age and high school.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we were reaching the end, kind of to recap things. I think I'd like to get the point across that it is very possible to successfully transform a kid into more of a plant-based eater. And I would like to remind people that I've said before, while I do believe that the whole food plant-based diet, the way we're doing it, is really the healthiest way of eating on the planet, it's not the only way to be healthy.
Right.
And if you don't have metabolic disease like I have, i.e. high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, history of obesity, all those things, your metabolism is healthy and can do everything it's supposed to do, a Mediterranean diet is a reasonable option. Again, a Mediterranean diet.
Not the Americanized version.
Yeah, a Mediterranean diet is an emphasis on fresh fruits and vegetables, and add a little bit.
I watched the Great Oil Debate with Dr. Garth Davis and Rip Esselstyn, and I gotta say, I think Rip's got that one. I mean, I just don't think he had anything to really challenge that. So, and Dr. Lyle says, hey, if there's a little bit of oil in your marinara, okay.
Yeah.
But he said, am I going to tell you to do a salad dressing with oil? He said, absolutely not. It's 4,000 calories per pound. Well, not that you're going to get a whole pound, but hey, with enough processed foods.
Oh, yeah.
If you're going to get catfish that's been fried or something,
Exactly.
And I always say it's okay to do it in a mild version, but don't plan the diet if you're not getting results for whatever you want to do.
Right. And that's what I would point to as well, is if you're looking for results from being on a plant-based diet, the best way is to be 100% in.
Right.
And if you can't yet go 100% in,
exactly,
which is fine, just don't be too disappointed if you're not getting the results that you really want.
That's right. And have patience with yourself. And it's like, what I want to say is, yes, we get frustrated sometimes, but there's not a part of us that's like, oh, I want to go back to eat. We really don't say that.
No.
I mean, we really don't.
I don't miss the old way of eating. I guarantee you, if I did not enjoy the way I was eating, almost 5 years into this, I would not still be doing it.
That's right. I mean, that's what I want people to know is, like anything, if anything that takes discipline, there's going to be, when you're working out, there's going to be days where you're like, oh,
Yeah.
but you're so glad and committed to yourself. And there's something about making that promise to yourself and keeping it that's really important.
Well, and here's the other important thing. Taste buds change.
They sure do.
Once I got my palate cleaned of needing all that salt and oil and sugar,
Yeah,
a whole new world opened up.
absolutely. And you'd be sick if you ate that way.
I
now.
would. And kids' taste buds, their palates change a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So don't be too concerned if a kid won't eat whatever it is for that particular day or week.
We had a post and it said their taste buds change every 2 weeks.
Right.
And, I love what Dr. Lyle said. He said, is caffeine going to do something to your body? He goes, yes, because that's why you have a headache when you stop. Same thing with those foods. If they were healthy for you, you would not feel like death after you get your palate clean. There's a reason why I always say, if you ate an orange 3 years later that you had not had, it would not do that to you.
Well, and I've relayed my experience with having been plant-based for a while, and my blood sugars were coming under control. And we had an evening that we decided, okay, we didn't plan real well for this, and family was in town. We went and ate pizza. This was
had it at the house.
Yeah. This was about, 3.5 years ago or so. And my blood sugar was wonky for days.
And there was one point
in the 200s wonky.
There was one point when you had popcorn when we went to movies with oil, and it was high for 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yep.
But that just shows that insulin resistance.
Right.
You were fairly new to it at that point, and that wouldn't be the case now.
And not only that, but I felt terrible for several days afterwards.
Oh my gosh.
I just felt sluggish, and it's a real thing.
Yeah. I mean, I know we have frustrations, but there's not one part of me that wants to go back to that.
Exactly. Well, I would like to encourage or maybe even challenge some of our viewers to experiment with finding a new plant-based meal to try this week.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Yeah.
And if you do that, feel free to let us know.
Yeah. And maybe even, look at your own diet. Like you may be more vegan than you think you are.
Right. Maybe. Well, I appreciate everybody tuning in. And
I want to say a quick shout out. I met this darling artist this week, and her studio is Moon Forest Studio. And it's her children's middle names. So everybody needs a pen from her. Like she had them at I know this isn't about food, but she had them at the retreat, and we all got them because they're darling. Every artist needs a little shout out.
They do.
That's right.
They do. All right. Thank you very much, and we'll hopefully see you next time.